In this video, we're gonna rebuild this design using Webflow so you guys can see exactly how the pros would do it. And first we're gonna take this design, move it into Figma, use auto layout, see how we would do that. And then we're gonna go right into Webflow and rebuild this from scratch. Let's get into it. So we have this design here. And by the way, the link is gonna be in the description if you wanna check this out. And I've gone ahead and moved it directly into Figma. And within Figma, I have taken the liberty of rebuilding this using auto layout. So if I use Command Y here, we can see all of the layers and how it's built and how everything is working here. But what we need to do in this video is going to be to rebuild this using Webflow. And the reason why Figma is so important in this case is because we can see all of the content that we are going to be rebuilding here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the design. By the way, I've added this file directly onto my Figma community. So if you want to go ahead and follow along and build this while I'm building it, feel free to do so. But if not, let's go ahead and get started. So here we'll notice that we have fixed and fixed resizing on both sides so that we cannot have it be filling or hugged. And this is going to be similar to having a fixed size as a breakpoint. And we have 1440p, so this is just the standard desktop. When we get started in looking at the content here, we're gonna break this down into a few different sections. So we have the background, and I can go ahead and just move this so we can take a look at it. This background I've merged together. So I've rebuilt this image here from this so that it's not going to be super high quality, but this is essentially a pencil line, or we can just trace the original design and go from there. Then we've got the nav and then the main content. So the main content is going to be the meat and bones of this video. So we've got the top row, right? So that's going to be these two areas here. We've got the bottom row, which is, I guess, the main content here, where we have some of these images, these three circles here. And then we have the word adventure. So that is going to come in later. But for now, let's take a look at how we're going to translate this into Webflow. Now, we could use the new plugin by Webflow, Figma to Webflow, super easy, but it actually wouldn't work in this case. And let me show you guys exactly why. So I'm going to go ahead and select the desktop one that I want. I'm going to copy this directly, and we'll see that it starts to break down as we start to prepare the assets. Okay, so it's copied it to clipboard. I'm going to go into my hero header here. I'm going to paste it directly into the body, and we'll see that from there, it's kind of mangled it a little bit. Now we have added all of the correct images here, but as you can see, the plugin isn't the best case scenario here. So we still do need to know exactly how to do this for very complex layouts like this one. So let's go ahead and get started with the layout here. So we've got the background, and I've added all of the images in Webflow already. So we've got the backdrop, we've got the adventure, all these different circles. So let's go ahead and get started. So right now we have only two classes in this entire project. I have the section and then hero header content. Now this is going to be where we're going to put everything in here. And I'm going to be using REMs for the entire build because it's a better way to build rather than pixels. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 96 pixels on both sides. And to convert this into REMs, I'm going to go ahead and do 96, just like that, 96 and 96. So what I can do here is go ahead and do divided by 16 rem, and it'll convert that. So we see that it's 6 rem, and I can get rid of these two here, just like that. Now we see that any content that we add is going to have that padding to begin with, which is great, just like we have it here. So this can be the nav. I'm going to call this nav. And this can just stretch out the entirety of the content here, just like that. And then we can give it maybe like 5 REMs for now, just so we can add in the content at a later stage. So the nav is going to be quite easy here. I'm going to add 3 individual divs. So this one can be, or I'm going to get rid of this one actually. This one can just be an image. We can choose the image and make sure that it's the logo, which I don't have, of course. So let's go ahead and export that first as a logo, SVG. So here we have the logo. And we can just move this to the right side here, and we can align this so that it will be equally spaced along all the different parts. So I'm going to add a text link here, and then this can be, I'm just going to call it NL, so it's easy to go back and forth. Okay, I'm just going to copy that, paste it. So now we've got text link, NL, and then NL wrapper, something like that. Okay, so we can go ahead and just duplicate that. Cool. And so now we're going to give it like 1 REM, 1 REM. Okay, so now we've got the nav bar here, and this toggle is going to be part of it. So we can go ahead and actually just add that as an image. I'm going to choose the toggle in this case, delete that. And these are SVGs that I created myself. So we can see that more or less they look as they're supposed to in the design, but let's go ahead and move on to the second part here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add in the background here. So for the background, I'm just going to add it as a background image, choose the image, and we can just go ahead, choose this one. And I'm going to click on contain so that it looks the best and it's centered. It's exactly where we want it. So now we've got those two parts, right? So we've got the nav with the logo, and then we've got the background. So we can honestly just start to forget about them, stop seeing them, and that kind of helps me. But let's go ahead and move on to the next ones here. So we're gonna go add a div, and that's gonna be broken into, let's go ahead and see here. Just gonna lock those two, just like that. Okay, so now I'm gonna lock adventure as well, so we can see exactly how we're supposed to do this. So we've got the top row, and the top row is then broken into 2 separate content divs. So I'm gonna stretch this one as well, call it top row 100%, so that it spans the entirety of the width. And we're gonna add another div in there because this one needs to be inside itself. Okay, so for this, we have a fixed width of 282. So we can do 282 divided by 16 REM. It's gonna give us a weird number. So I think we can just kind of round up to 18. It's fine. And so here we're gonna go top content wrapper. That's fine. And so now we're gonna give it a text block or maybe a paragraph, start adding the content here. And then in there, we can also add a link, so a text link. I believe that would be a text link. Okay, so now we can just call this explore. And all these text links, let's go ahead and get rid of this blue default design. Like that. Okay, so then for this one specifically though, we can go ahead and make it a lighter color, explore as we have it here. Okay, so we can see that it's even right now, it's starting to come together, but we need to add this part here. So I'm gonna go ahead and add a text block or just a text block to that as well. Make sure that in terms of the flex, it's just like this, but we see that it's a little bit off to the left, right? If we check the original design here, we see that it's more in line with the top nav. So let's go ahead and add that. So we got est 1961. But of course we need to add that side little bit there. But how would we do that necessarily if we didn't have the Figma file? Well, we know that because of the Figma file, we see that one of the easiest ways to build this is either having a fixed size for the wrapper or stretching it all the way and then adding a little bit of padding on the content itself. But in this case, we can go ahead and do just a max width for this container. So max width can be whatever this is, 1096 pixels. So we can do 60 rems in this case because that's what it's converting into. Now it's gonna look a little bit weird in this scenario. Oh, we can see that the background here is starting to repeat. Okay, so now it's getting close. Let's go ahead and change this color to be something like that light gray there. Okay, so now we've got the top div and then we've got this div, which is split into 2 more rows, right? So we've got the bottom 2 rows. So this one is these 3 images here. Now I've copied it the best I can and I have the images themselves here. So let's go ahead and add those. But within that itself, we have to add space between the top row and the bottom 2 rows. So that is just its own div, its own spacing auto layout. And that is in the format of 264 pixels or whatever the equivalent is in REMs. But we'll see that before we can do that, if we go into X-ray mode with Shift Command X, just like that, on Mac at least, we have spacing here that we need to solve. So let's go ahead and do that first. So we've got this one here, which is 56 pixels. So we can just go ahead and do that. So rows, we can do 56 pixels divided by 16 rem, or we can do 56 pixels. Okay, so for now that's easier. So now let's go ahead and add in the rest. So we have to add a div before the top row here. So we can add the top row within a div. And then this div can be, we can just call it content, and this can stretch the entirety. So it's a little bit better right there. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add our div that we want, and this can be also flex. Just gonna add 256 pixels in this scenario, but we can obviously change it later. So we've got the bottom rows, and then within these bottom rows, we have to add 2 more rows, and we'll call these row 1 and row 2. So now we can just differentiate those 2. So we've got the top row. It's simply just the images on the right side. So let's go ahead and add that. So we can go ahead and add image. I'm just gonna duplicate that 3 times. So that's the first one. Go ahead and add the second one, and then the third one, just like that. I'll just call these SS, SSI, surfer images. So to get these all on the right side like we want them, let's go ahead and change this to 100 pixels. Okay, or maybe like 110, that's fine. And we can probably start to using margin here. We can go -10, -20, something like that, so that we can use the same kind of effect here of these images going on top of each other. And to get all the information on the right side, well, it's pretty simple. We just use the right align tool there. But one thing that you will notice is that the images are leaving the div and they're not in line with the content anymore. So if we want to, we can choose the padding itself, the same amount of padding that we've added to the margin here. So we can choose 20 pixels to move it to the left side instead of the right side. In that way, everything is aligned again. So we can go back up to bottom rows and fix up this margin here, this padding, which is going to be 120 pixels, add a vertical 120 pixels, just like that. And so we can see that we're starting to get there in terms of the layout. It's very simple from this point on in terms of the layout itself. It's just simply a flex box with the content aligned to the right. So let's go ahead and build that really quick. So we're going to add a new div here, and this can be bottom content, just like that. And we can just go ahead and quickly add these in here. So this can be our mission, okay, just like that. And then we can add a quick button. So I'm gonna quickly go ahead and do this one so that I'm not spending too much time on it, but we've got button, something like that, and then how to start. So that's the main aspects of that. And then we can do for the rows, I forgot what it was here, but it's 16, so 1 rem. And in this case, we notice that the spacing between these two is greater between the button and the text, right? So one way that we can do that is either add spacing directly here. So we can add another 16 pixels to the margin, and that's fine. Or we can add a div on top of that, then add padding to it. But this one is completely fine for our scenario here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and change the content that we need it to here. So we can go ahead and do 25 pixels here, and we can start to add some of the images that we need. So this can be 365 for the width, just like that. And we can add some images in this scenario. Now for the row, we do need it to be flex box to the right side here. And then between the rows, we have to add 69, 70 pixels, so 69, just like that. And it's always a good idea to make them equal just so that we have the content itself. Okay, so in this scenario, we have the images themselves, but the task here is going to be to match the content so that it's in line with this line here, so that we have the same exact amount of spacing between each other, so that it's in line here, just like it is in the Figma design. Now, in our case, we have a fixed size of 294 pixels, so that's fine. But we see that it's not always the case where the design is going to perfectly be in line with Figma. So what we can do in this case to have the images overlap over the content, just like we would have here, if we go ahead and make this as it should be, just like that. If we clip the content, we'll see that the images are going to pass, right? They're going to go past the design. And that is good in Webflow for if we want to add an animation where it's moving, if we scroll, something like that. So we can go ahead and do row 150%, and that'll solve our issues there. So let's go into row 2, and we can start to add spacing here for maybe, what was the spacing here? So we've got 70 pixels, just like that. And we can just start to play around with this, so it's a little bit closer to our design. So maybe in this case, we go back to 70, and we can maybe reduce this, just like that. So we've got 295 here. We can increase the spacing just a little bit. We've got 1.5 and then a dash, which will keep it consistent throughout. Okay, so this looks great right now, but if we go ahead and zoom out or go into the preview mode, we'll see that there is obviously an issue there. So a good thing to do in Webflow, if you don't have a browser size big enough, is to do command and minus, get your browser to be 75%, and then you'll have the layers also be able to be on the left side here, so you can see what it actually is going to look like when you launch this. So in this case, we've got the content itself is now matching up with the image, but we can see that there's an issue here where the content is going to be overlapping if we do not have overflow as hidden, just like that. So from here, we are getting pretty close to what we need, but to get all the way there, there's a few things that we should do, just like adding the adventure here, making sure that all the content is right. But in this case, let's see, we've got a few more things to do here, and that is not a big problem, because if we wanted to add maybe this background to fit the entirety of the way, we can add a cover just like that, and then this will make more sense. So now that we've got all this figured out, you will be thinking, okay, this looks good in this scenario, but what about all the other ones? Well, we'll get to that at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But we've got the nav, the content here, and now we're missing the big adventure in the middle. So the big adventure here is going to arguably be one of the easiest ones to add, just because it is an SVG that we can add just like this. So let's go ahead into the content here, make sure that we can see it, and we'll say that, okay, that looks not that bad, but we need to make sure that this fits within the right design. So we can go ahead and name this adventure, make this absolute, and now we can just move this around wherever we need to. So for example, let's go ahead and move it to the top here, and with the percentages, we can move this down. This can be auto and auto, so we can center that. So after all that building, here is one of the more complex designs that we have created. Now granted, in terms of breakpoints and scalability and all those different things, this would be a more complicated design to retrofit, just because mainly for this background here, if we're going to start adding, so for example, 1920 here, if we're going to start adding all these different breakpoints and we want it to grow and shrink and be fluid as a design, then we'd need to play around with the background, in my opinion. So maybe what I would do in this case to have it be a more fluid design is to stretch this design here so that maybe the background stretches as well, and we have more of these clouds, more of these birds going on, the more background or the more breakpoints that you have. But in this case, as a standalone design, as just replicating what we see on Dribbble, this great design, putting it directly into Webflow. I think this is a mission accomplished, if I do say so myself. But in terms of mobile, what would this look like? Well, if I had to take a chance on this design as a mobile and I went into the iPhone 14 here, if I added its own design, I think the take that I would do for this design, if I go ahead and grab the background here, I would simply use this maybe as the main component for the hero header. We could probably add, see, I probably locked adventure. So we go ahead and add this somewhere as well. But as you can tell, this is not going to be the main aspect of the video, right? And then we've got some text blocks here, but let's go ahead and just pop that up top. Okay. And we can probably just put this in here. So this is more or less, if I had to do something related to this design, that's probably what I would do. Maybe more of a lighter blue here, so it's not completely, yeah, I'm not 100% sure here, but something like that. I think using this design would probably be the right move. I'm not sure if this is exactly what we would be doing in this case, but you know, that's for a different video in this scenario. But if you guys enjoyed this build and you guys do want to follow along with all of this Webflow relative absolute building scenarios, then do let me know down below if you guys enjoyed this. If you guys have any questions about the design, then also let me know. In terms of the styling, we can finish that another time, but just in terms of the time for this video, I'm afraid we're out of time here. But let me know if you guys enjoyed, if you guys want to see anything more like this. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.